Yeah, okay, well, we'll call this meeting to order.
Thank you.
Phoebe, do you want to do the roll call, please?
Yeah, so before we get to that, we have a slightly new protocol today because Chair Johnson is participating remotely using the Just Cause exemption. So Chair Johnson notified me yesterday that he'd be attending remotely today pursuant to state law AB 2449, which allows up to 2 virtual attendances per calendar year for Just Cause. And Chair Johnson, would you mind stating your Just Cause? You just did, but for the record.
Thank you, guys.
And so Chair Johnson's participating remotely because he has a contagious illness. And we also have to ask if you have anyone else over the age of 18 in the room with you.
Nobody here.
Okay. And then the only other difference under this participation method is that we have to take all of our votes by roll call. So for today, that's just the minutes approval. So we can't just say all those in favor, all those opposed. We need to actually take a roll call because there's a remote attendee under this exception. So now we will go to the roll call. And committee member Wall.
Here.
Thank you. Committee member Simon.
Here.
Thank you. Committee member Lang. Here. Thank you. Committee member Burtis.
Here, sort of. And also, sorry, I'm not there in person, but as you said, it is ski week, so we are skiing.
Thank you, Pat. Committee member Alden.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Ruiz is absent, and Chair Johnson.
Here.
Great, thank you.
It is, watching the meeting with the owl, it's pretty dynamic. It's kind of interesting. It's everybody moves as soon as they talk. Could I lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, open time for any public comment. Do we have any public in attendance, Phoebe?
We do have one of our student ambassadors in attendance in person, but we have that as a separate agenda item, unless you have anything else you'd like to comment on at this time. We do have a raised hand in the online audience. So I will allow them to talk and they will have 3 minutes to provide public comment. So
Great.
Andy, you've been allowed to speak. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Hold on one moment. I had a little speech here about the First Amendment. Is that all right to read?
It's your time, Andy.
All right, is this about anything, or does it have to pertain with the subject matter?
I think this is open time. We'd prefer it pertain to the subject matter of climate action, but what's on your mind, Andy?
Oh, sorry, I think I'm in the wrong meeting. Sorry about that.
We're happy to have you stick around.
Yeah, I'll listen. Sorry about that.
Okay. Phoebe, is there anybody else?
I am not seeing anyone else with their hands raised at this time. I'll just check for email, public comment. And
Okay.
not seeing any.
Okay. Moving on to item 3, approval of the meeting minutes from December 20. Seems like a long time ago. Does anybody have any comment or discussion item on the meeting minutes that were distributed?
I do not.
Hearing none, do I have a motion of approval?
I'll move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Yeah.
I second.
Okay, Phoebe, can we take a roll call vote?
Yes. Committee member Wall,
Yes.
committee member Simon.
Yeah.
Committee member Lang,
Yes.
committee member Burtis,
Yes.
committee member Alden,
Yes.
and Chair Johnson.
Yes.
Okay, that
Great.
motion carries.
Item number 4, general business. We're gonna have, I think we're gonna have extra time today, Phoebe, so I think we can go through this, at a casual pace. But, as you remember, very early on, we talked about communication strategies. We're gonna talk about that a little bit more today. But the opportunity of, that we have to connect with, parents through schools and to connect with students, especially upper class students, has always been important to this group. And we've talked about this role of student ambassadors in the past, and we put out a notification. Phoebe can catch me on my facts, but we put out an invitation for student ambassadors to join us. We went to a few of the schools, and we did have some applicants, and we chose 2. We asked them if they would kindly accept this assignment on top of all of the things they're doing in school. And they did. And luckily, we have students that are upperclassmen, and they're also involved in the environmental club that I hope that they will share with you. One, excuse me. Phoebe, why don't you give me a break and read the statement from our first ambassador?
Sure. If you don't mind, Dave, I was actually gonna have our in-person ambassador go first, and she's here in person. So we have Sydney joining us today. And Sydney, do you wanna say a couple sentences about yourself and
Just want to put it on mic.
your interest in the committee? You can speak from wherever you'd like to.
Whatever works best, whatever.
The owl will.
Welcome, Sydney. We're so
Yeah,
happy to
welcome.
have you here.
We're really happy you're here. Yeah.
I'm very glad to be here. Does this work? I can totally go to the mic if that works better.
I can hear you perfectly fine.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Okay. Fix up.
I'm Sid Walling, Sydney, but I go by Sid. I'm a junior in high school at Redwood High.
Go Giants.
Go Giants, yes. Like he said, I'm a member of our Environmental Action Committee. It's a club that runs one day a week at lunches at my school. I work on media there, so
Oh,
I run a segment on our school's TV channel, Redwood TV, which is an environmental spotlight segment. And I write, and with the help of my team, I produce and publish episodes giving information about general environmental news, opportunities in our community, opportunities within our school. I've always been very interested in finding ways to take action, especially within our community. I've been interested in, nature and animals ever since I was a young kid, and I'm very happy to find a way to reach out to my community and take action and learn about sort of the more detailed sort of processes of actually doing things within your community. And I'm very excited to be here. So it is very lovely to meet you all. And yeah.
we're really happy that you're here. Welcome and thank you. Are you a junior or a senior?
I'm a junior.
Thank goodness. We get you for 2 years then, or a year and a half anyway.
All right, so our second student ambassador was unfortunately not able to make it this afternoon. Her name is Reyes Lake, and she is a 10th grader at Redwood High School. And she sent me this couple sentences to read to you all. My name is Reyes Lake, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all soon. Climate activism has been a big part of my life since I was in elementary school, when I became a vegetarian and grew a passion for stopping the deforestation caused by palm oil plantations. I'm very interested in the correspondence between climate justice and social justice. For example, how marginalized lower income communities bear the worst effects of climate change. I'm grateful for this opportunity to create change within our community and learn from you all. So hope Reyes will be able to join us at the next meeting in March.
Terrific. This is really exciting. It's, this is really exciting. Really happy to have you here. and to have that engagement and hopefully to really broaden it outside of Corte Madera. I mean, to bring in all of the wisdom and the energy and the passion that students have for all the reasons that, you know, your future is at stake, right? So yeah, we're really glad to have your engagement.
Anybody else have some words of caution?
This is government. We don't necessarily move as quickly as we'd like, but the conversations are public and they're really important.
Do you have anything else on this item?
Well, I just wanted to give Sydney a chance. You know, Sydney, we had one quick session together with Phoebe, and I just wondered if you had any thoughts or questions for all of us. Since we talked, we're just so happy to have you here, and we are going to be defining the engagement a little bit more. But your introduction here was the first step. So, do you have any thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And it's really lovely to meet you all. I think, you know, as far as what I know now, my only question would be what I believe I asked you and Phoebe last week about, just like a little bit about you guys and your interest in taking action and how you got here. If, of course, you know, our time permits and you guys are open to sharing.
You've met me and Phoebe. Why don't we start from with Phil and just go across the table? No, I'm sorry. Why don't you guys organize yourselves? Let's start with Pat since he's remote, and Pat. Yeah. We're just so happy to have all these diverse, strong skill sets on the committee. But could you each take a minute to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, I'll go first. Hi, Sid. Great to meet you. Pat Burtis. I'm a recent joiner of the committee. I think it was, I don't know, the first meeting was August, I think, or September last year for me. I have lived in Corte Madera for a little over 10 years. My interest in climate goes way back. I grew up in the countryside of Vermont and have always had a strong environmental ethos, and then got into business and saw all the waste and pollution and all the sort of unnecessary despoilment of the environment, and figured there ought to be a way to do business better. And long story short, I'm an investor in technology, some of which relates to environmental technology. I did a master's at the Yale School of Forestry about 15 years ago, focused on renewable energy and energy storage and climate science and all that good stuff. So I've spent my career kind of bopping around all over the place, and I figured it was time to kind of get involved and try to contribute much more locally. So that's what I'm doing here. We're going to talk a little bit about a potential engagement strategy around a very specific topic. So you're going to get a feel today for the kind of stuff we're dealing with. But since you mentioned your media sort of endeavors at school, we should sort of circle back up at the end of the meeting, I think, and talk about whether there's some way to find some kind of common ground on that. But great to have you here. And thank you for agreeing to do it.
Thank you, Pat. Karen, do you want to go next?
Okay, I'll just briefly, yeah, I've spent my career, and I'm retired, semi-retired, doing environmental economic things. I have degrees from University of Pennsylvania in economics and energy management. I worked for the first few years in consulting on conservation technologies, marketing, how to displace nuclear, other plants, et cetera. And then I got more involved in natural gas operations. And then towards the end of my career, I spent 3 years helping PG&E determine what we need to do to enact the state sort of greenhouse gas plan. In other words, how we need to reduce it, and was that feasible given the energy system? So anyway, that's my background. I've been in Corte Madera for 12 years, and I'm a recent joiner too from the summer. For now.
Phil, do you want to go?
Sure. I'm was born and raised in Corte Madera, and I'm a Redwood High grad, proud to say.
Go Giants.
And I'm a general contractor. I only do my own work now for myself, but I thought that I could contribute something with knowledge about buildings and how they're put together and what we can do to make them more resilient and use less carbon and maybe find some ways to work with the building department and the town to make that happen. I have 3 daughters, and one of them is pretty engaged in energy stuff. She lives in Iceland and works for the State Department. Engages a lot of big players in carbon sequestration and how those things apply to the United States. So she kind of piqued my interest in nudging me onto this committee.
Thanks, Phil. Leslie.
Leslie Alden of San Francisco, born and raised. I've lived in Corte Madera for about 40 years, a little more than that. My early background was in advertising and communication marketing. I then went back to school and got a degree at Cal in education and public policy and worked with communities at risk and a lot of community work. And then I was hired by a Marin County supervisor who's passed away. But when he hired me, he said, "You're going to be my CCA aide." And I had no idea what that was. But we were I got to be part of the group that started the first community choice aggregation program in the state of California, which was Marin Clean Energy. So we launched in 2010 with 6,500, with great resistance, but with 6,500 ratepayers, and not even all of the cities, including not even Corte Madera. But there are now 23 operational CCAs in the state of California, serving 11 million ratepayers. So that's like a paradigm shift that really had a huge impact. So I worked for the county in that role for 13 and a half years and left right before COVID. I didn't have a crystal ball. And just was really working on what's the next big idea and how do we scale the great work that's being done and really engage business and community and government, because that sort of sweet spot in the middle is where kind of the magic happens. It's not just the advocates over here or just government over here, but it's like getting everyone engaged with best practices. So I started a nonprofit. Again, what was I thinking? But it's been really, it's kind of been this sweet, wonderful zigzag of a career, and everything has kind of ended up here with community and marketing and advertising and policy, and really focused on climate and getting off of fossil fuels. So one never knows when one starts one's career where one is going to end up, but taking it from that larger national, international, or even state level and the regional level and bringing it home where I live and being part of this committee with David, we started, 5 years ago, kind of talking about this. So yeah, it's been this incremental shift in terms of community conversations, but there's really this emphasis now. People are aware that there's a climate problem. And according to Yale Climate Communication Center, about 80% of the people in the Bay Area recognize that there's a problem, and most don't know where to start. So this is where we start, at home. Yeah, so I'm glad you're part of this.
Thank you, Leslie Martin.
Yeah, I'm Martin Wall. I had a career in data product management with, among other folks, Equifax. So I've been involved with credit data and that sort of thing. And then after the collapse of the mortgage industry, I started to run a biodiesel plant over in Richmond. And that sort of gave me a worm's eye view of what the alternative fuel world looked like. And that didn't turn out very well, as many of them didn't. And I've been retired since then. And I've been supporting this committee, doing writings and research for anything that we want to do. So it's been very good. We have a tremendous group, a lot of really good resources here. So great to have you on board. We've been really waiting for someone somewhat younger than us to be involved and really looking forward to that.
Well, thank you, everyone. Sydney and Reyes, who I hope will be watching this on video, recording. We're delighted to have you with us. I'm happy to be your primary contact, and I know that my fellow committee members would be happy to take a question or two from you as well. I think it's time for us to move on.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
What's
Do
that?
do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I had a great afternoon with Sydney and Riz. We had carefully scheduled time to use the council chambers. Phoebe and I showed up, and our student ambassadors did not. So I still have not met Sydney in person. So you guys are one up on me.
We had a miscommunication about whether the meeting was in person or remote. So they did show up. They were just
Yeah.
on the Zoom and we were.
Yeah. So let's move on. Sydney, thank you very much. Shall we move on to item number B?
Yes, I'll just check for public comment really quickly on this
Okay.
item.
And yeah, David, before I interrupted you, sorry, you were asking Sydney if she had questions for any of us.
As of now, no, but I was writing down a few things that some of you guys talked about that you worked in before this. So I'm very excited to do a little bit of research and get to know you all more, but I will have questions, I'm sure later on. I said that last time, but the more I know, the more I want to ask, so. Yeah.
That's great. We want to be a resource for you, and we hope you'll be a resource for us.
Mhm.
Sydney.
So not seeing any public comment on this item, David. Yeah.
Okay, we've achieved perfection, I guess. So let's go on to item B, discussion of communication strategy proposal. Alden, Burtis, and Simon.
I think I was nominated to lead the effort here from the subcommittee point of view, but of course, Leslie and Phil, please chime in. Hopefully everybody had a chance to read the draft proposal that was in the agenda packet. The purpose of, today's kind of bringing this up to today's meeting was just to get some initial feedback from you all about, does this seem like a worthwhile effort? And then any, of course, more specific comments about actual implementation. It looks like we don't have Adam here, so maybe at the course of this conversation, we could get any feedback that Phoebe might have from staff about this, and specifically about the idea of waiving permitting fees for hot water heaters. But let's hold off on that. We'll get to that in a minute. So I'm not going to rehash the whole thing because I think everybody's read it, hopefully. But we just to kind of briefly recap.
I didn't see it. Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it, and I guess I just briefly didn't look
Okay.
for the attachment. So a brief description would be helpful, and then I will
Sure.
go back and for sure.
Yeah, and Patrick, because this is recorded, if you go through it with a little bit of detail, that might help the public also.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, I was just going to ask Phoebe. Thank you if you could put that up, because I was split screening, so now I don't have to. Yeah, so this was kind of came out of the December meeting. I think there was a general sense that although there is a very consistent effort in terms of outreach, particularly Martin and Amy through the Chronicles, and also sort of the events and tabling that we're doing, that there may be space for some sort of more targeted communications around specific topics to specific stakeholders, potentially using other channels that might grab people's attention. So we kind of, the three of us sort of, and with Phoebe's help, kind of took that and sort of thought through, well, what would be some topics that we could amplify this year to, Corte Madera stakeholders. And we have kind of settled on one to start with. And so we wanted to run that by you. We started by first going through the climate action work plan for 23-24, which I think was still in draft form, which we had seen in one of the meetings late last year, and sort of looked for stuff that was up near the top of that priority list. topics that we thought could have, material near-term impact on GHG emissions of the town, where there's a clear call to action, something that can be, understood and communicated. And in some cases, there may be some time sensitivity, which, makes now a good time to broadcast the message. So based on all that, we landed on one topic, which we thought was a good one to kind of push out, ideally in the first half of this year, which is heat pump water heaters. And there were two others that we want to investigate further. One is EV chargers in multi-tenant residential buildings, and the other is energy storage. But we're not going to talk about those today, but just to let you know that if there's interest in sort of making this a more sort of recurring process, that we can circle back and hit those other two topics at some point as well. So we drafted up for heat pump water heaters kind of a messaging strategy document. I know we have a couple people here who've got a lot of experience in communications and messaging, so it'll be great to get input from the committee. The thinking around heat pump water heaters. Well, firstly, the target audience here is primarily homeowners and landlords, but there's sort of ancillary audiences such as contractors, builders, architects, and specifiers. And then lastly, it'd be great to have the support of town staff in pushing out this message. So the main messages are, firstly, there are very significant incentives available today for heat pump water heaters. I think you all know that I recently installed one. We installed one at our house. Just to give you a sense of it, the total cost of it was about $9,500, and $8,700 of it was covered by incentives and rebates. So we ended up paying about $1,200 out of pocket for a new water heater, which is pretty nice. And of course, obviously, you have effectively zero carbon footprint with that, given firstly, we're signed up with MCE, but also we have solar. So we have very green electrons. So there are great incentives right now. Those will apply to just about anybody in Corte Madera, as far as we understand. However, these incentives will not be in place forever. And so the message is, if you think you will need a new water heater in the next few years, now's the time. Do it this year effectively. We would love to have as kind of a fourth bullet point that, by the way, Corte Madera is also waiving the permitting fees for heat pump water heaters for this year only. And let's circle back on that and see whether we get some traction with that. We have a perception, and we can talk about the data in a minute, that the permitting fees and process have been an inhibitor to people actually, getting the permits, and therefore, in this case, accessing these rebates, many of which require a signed off permit. So that's the main message. I know Martin and Amy. Martin, you guys have hit this point a bunch of times in the chronicles and have some good resources as to what heat pump water heaters are. I thought it would be useful in this communication to have potentially just a sidebar that gives you a very brief description, and then maybe links to one of the resources that would, for those who want to know more about how it all works. But the idea is to have a short, punchy communication, not the way I'm delivering it currently, but something in the form of either a letter or a postcard that would go out and just really hit the highlights and try to get some people motivated. So the call to action here would be, for whoever's receiving this message, would be, here are some resources you can access to understand, firstly, is a heat pump water heater appropriate for your home? 2, what incentives are available? And 3, what do I do next? And so there's a couple sources we can link to there. They're kind of some incentive aggregators, I guess I would call them, like Quick Carbon or Ready, Set, Replace, who I found very helpful in our process of going through this. Switcheson.org gives you a list of contractors if you want to go directly to the contractors. And then ideally, we would be able to point to our own Climate Action Committee website with some resources. I think that's a probably topic we should follow up on as to what would be required to, what kind of refresh would be possible there to make that a tool that we could use more frequently. In terms of communication channels, we sort of drew up a laundry list here, and would love to get your feedback on this. I think the first one that, we all felt would be great was a direct mailing, either postcard or letter to Corte Madera households. So I think this is on the order of 3,000 households. Don't have the exact number, but we need to figure out the cost for that. What was that?
4,000 households, 60 contractors, and I think PB said that the cost was around 3,000 to do a bulk mail postcard.
So
Okay,
do we have the resources to do that?
Yes.
Okay, and so if this committee, would we want to, I guess, let me wait for comments, wait till you finish, sorry.
okay, my dog has decided to comment, so apologies for that. Hopefully he'll shut up. So that was the, kind of think the one that we would prioritize among that, but there were a lot of other ideas. Obviously, reaching out to HOAs would be great. There aren't that many of them, so I think that's achievable. Having some collateral at the permitting and planning counters, and as I mentioned earlier, sort of staff training to support that. In addition, our typical tabling and event outreach. If you'll excuse me for a moment, I'm going to put these guys in the other room. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Website we talked about. Phil had a great idea, which was, I don't know, some of you may have noticed the lighted signboards. One of which was on San Clemente. I think the other one was on Tam, and also at the town, at the community center, to broadcast this. We could see if Nextdoor does public service announcements. I don't know if they do, but that would be interesting if they would do something for free. And then we should talk about strategies to reach landlords, property managers, and so on. So that's kind of the gist of it. What we're looking for here, firstly, is some feedback from y'all. Secondly, I think we need to verify these incentives and sort of how much capacity there is still and how long they're going to be around. We don't want to over promote this topic only to find out that people are applying and getting turned down. So I think that's a relatively easy thing to do, but we just need to do it. Cost and feasibility of the marketing channels. If we could get some help with the copywriting and graphic design, that would be great. I don't have a resource. It would be great to get someone to do it pro bono if possible. And then, as we mentioned, kind of the website refresh. Lastly, since we are if we did move ahead with this, we would be expending some resources on it. I think it's reasonable to ask kind of what would be success here. What does success look like? So we kind of back of the envelope feels like there ought to be about 200 water heaters, maybe 300 being replaced annually in Corte Madera. I think it was Karen who shared some data previously that there were only 19 permits pulled or something like that last year. So only
Yeah, so
about
really like 15, yeah, exactly. So who knows where the real number is, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, maybe 10% of the people are getting permits. So that's very hard to know what's happening, but assuming, 3,000, 4,000 homes, call it a 15-year replacement cycle, there ought to be, 200, 250, something like that, water heaters per year. We're clearly not getting visibility to those. So just something to chew on is kind of, what percentage of those being replaced with heat pump water heaters would we consider to be a success? And then, kind of what's a reasonable cost per conversion based on that. So that's the gist of it. I'll pause there and maybe if Leslie or Phil, if you want to add anything, otherwise we'd love to have comments from the committee.
Thanks, Patrick. You did a great job. I have nothing else really to add to this at this point. I'd love to hear from everybody else.
So I have a question. I certainly haven't replaced my water heater with heat pump, but my knowledge is that you may need to upgrade electrical and need to be more space around the heat pump water heater, so the location may need to change. Do we need to include that? Do you think is that
Yes.
information that we should include on a postcard, or is that something that we feel it's too detailed, might be discouraging?
Great question.
I would, so firstly, yeah, it's a great point. We had exactly that debate at our house. The ones that typically require the electrical upgrade will be the hybrid heaters, which have a kind of on-demand heating element as well as the heat pump. Those, from memory, I think you need a 30 amp circuit or something, and 240, I think. And most people, from what I understand from the contractor I talked to, most people are able to avoid getting one of those by getting a larger tank. which will only have a heat pump in it. And then you run into the space issue potentially. But it's very situation specific. And I guess my feeling is I'd rather not discourage people in the primary message and just say, hey, talk to a contractor, they'll come and tell you. If it's going to be a problem, it'll be a problem. There may be enough incentives to cover the cost of, if you need to put it outside, for instance, or, build a new mechanical closet or something. In our case, we didn't need to do that, but I guess my bias was to just get the main message across. And if people are curious enough to look into it and they find that out, that would be something they can then address on their own.
And, okay, so one thing from the building permit data, again, there are only a few, but, a number of them were replacing water heaters that were damaged by floods, but I think from anecdotally, people are replacing them, when one fails and they want to get something in quick, and then gas is easy, it's gas on gas, let's go. Is there a message here to replace your water heater before it fails?
Yes.
Yes.
So do we want to, is that going to be more explicit, or is that really just do it while we have the incentives kind of thing?
So I like that.
I had thought of seeing if we could get a sharper focus on the vintage of housing, and if we could approach them. I know that you could do this with a list company for sure. I mean, it's the tax rolls to find out when the dwelling was built, and then target a different message to the different types of folks you're going to do, who they are, the kinds of things they ought to be concerned about. The thing I think we need to have the strongest focus on is the incentives. We have to have it locked down, that because people are going to say, well, we hear about this, that, and the other, and the IRA isn't whatever it is isn't in effect yet, and all that. To be able to really precisely tell folks what they can expect. And, like, do you need to upgrade to 220, the size differences you need? There's an excellent video actually from PG&E. It's a training video, it's an hour, and this guy goes into great lengths and answer every question you can possibly have about heat pump water heaters. Really succinct. And he said he's up in Oregon, but he's happy to talk to people about it. So we could really engage him if we needed to get an independent voice on it. Plus, I was thinking of talking with plumbers who have done the heat pump installations, like yours, Pat, for example, to find out what problems they encounter and how to make things as smooth as possible when someone makes that decision. So that's the kind of thing to think about in doing the marketing campaign.
But
You want to be different if you're talking to folks who have a house that was built, in the early 50s versus something in the 2000s. It's just a different.
I guess I'd question that. I mean, I have a house that's listed as 1925, and I have new appliances, so people replace their appliances every 15.
Well, that's so old. I would say that's so old, we'd assume that someone would have done that. It's the the mid 60s and into the 70s where.
But people
That's
replace
still
their
50
appliances every
years ago.
20,
Yeah.
and they would have replaced their
That's a good
appliances
point.
by now, so I'm wondering what different message you would have for them.
Well,
It's-
you just start out by saying, we know what kind of house you've got, so that we're paying attention to you. That's one thing. I mean, it's.
I'm not sure that.
I don't know that we do
message.
have that data, and I think for simplicity's sake, and it would make sense to just have one mailer that goes
Message,
out to everyone. And then we're not trying to make assumptions about people's homes, and especially if we're just focusing on heat pump water heaters, which is the proposal here, I think that.
And maybe since we don't know all the details of what everyone's life is like, and we don't know that when something is going to break down and it's an emergency, maybe the initial message is make a plan before it's an emergency.
Yes.
Be ready to make to pull the trigger, so to speak, make the decision about what you're going to do when it goes out, or maybe it's about to go out because it's 15 or 20 years old, and you replace it before it dies and you have no hot water. So it's like, make a plan, and here are the incentives that would make it easier. Here are the resources that will help, help you learn about what your options are.
Maybe we could modify, it. If we're pushing these incentives that may expire the end of this year,
Right.
say, if you think
Right.
your hot water heater,
Right.
this is it for this year. Yeah.
Exactly. And Patrick has been saying that. I think
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
really, it's kind of a 1-2 message.
Right.
You make a plan and here's why.
Well, I think the incentive is the attention getter. So the
Yeah.
incentive, and
Yes.
then,
Yes.
there's your thing. Yeah. No, I think that's really, I really like the idea of a mail communication, because it's going right there. It's not like the Chronicles, et cetera. And I'm wondering, if we do this, maybe it's something we do once a year, twice a year, and what is our key message to get out? This is our very prime time to reach the homeowners.
I think almost quarterly is a good idea. That might get a bit more expensive, but the idea of, not just sending it out once and then assuming that everyone actually saw it, read it, kept it on the refrigerator with a magnet. It's like people need to hear a message several times before it actually sort of sinks in.
And you would know better than I, but then,
Well, no,
then I worry about, would they disregard it? Oh, here's another postcard. I don't know. Maybe there's some sweet spot.
I
Yeah,
looked up
exactly.
research on responses to direct mail,
Mhm.
and they're mostly with just solicitations, you just throw them in the wastebasket.
Right.
And there's quite a bit more positive response to something like this.
Mhm.
Like actually half the people will actually glance at it.
And, we're not selling something. We're
Right,
not
we're not selling
selling
something.
something.
Right.
We're not saying, great deal for you, $9.99.
Right.
It's,
Right.
we're not doing that. And we don't want to look like that either.
Yeah, and it'll come with, town branding on it.
Mhm.
Right, right.
I like the idea about the high level hooks and a sense of urgency, maybe using time this summer to address this issue in your home. We also have the ability to have kind of an FAQ or a white paper that's on our website. So if we want to refer people,
You froze.
Shows, well,
Froze.
Did you look, you're really contemplating.
Yeah.
David, you froze. If you can hear us, can you text him or?
I don't have his number. But if he doesn't come back in a couple minutes. I can-
White paper. The phone.
There
There
you
it
go.
is.
You're back.
You're back.
Nope,
Oh,
nope,
oh,
nope.
no.
I'm gonna try turning your video off, Dave, if you can hear us still.
You call him.
I'm just gonna text him.
hello? How about now?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can hear you.
Okay. Phoebe and I attended some county sessions that we could harvest some great stories and information from that could go in the FAQ. I think we've shared that with the group in the past, but Phoebe, could we reshare that link?
What are you referring to specifically, Dave, from the countywide electrification plan?
Yeah, there was some great some great case studies that were presented there.
Okay, I'll have to look for that, but yes.
And then
David,
just
was
some,
that,
there was
David,
one
was
by
that
a
a-
contractor. And there's for the FAQ, probably not for, and for our discussions with the city about where to put the outdoor unit. I did some research recently. This is just to share a little bit. I did some research recently, and the contemporary hot water heaters have the outdoor unit produces a sound at 48 dBA, which I didn't know what 48 dBA is, but 40 dB is a quiet library. 50 dB is a conversation, like a quiet conversation.
Mhm.
I think that's what Phil just said.
Like a
So
quiet refrigerator. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so I think people are talking about noisy equipment in near houses, but it's older equipment. It's not the options that we have now. But I want to just express gratitude for the group that went above and beyond in your approach to this. This is a great little body of work. It's pretty cool.
Oh, this thing, yeah.
I have a question. So I think this is great, and
Good.
I think we need to focus on one action and doing it well and measure success. But we'd also talked about a number of other things for the year. You know, a library lecture or whatever are we gonna stop here, or should we have other things we want to do in the year, or when does that get reviewed?
That's a good question. I think that was left sort of open-ended at the last meeting, and the subcommittee was just focusing on this one part of that overall conversation that we had about engagement strategies for this year. So we can certainly bring that back on the agenda at the next meeting and talk about other approaches that we
Okay.
might want to consider.
Okay, and what, just what more needs to be done to enact this strategy if we all say it's okay?
Good question.
So
So
we're
the-
looking-
There's a
Do that.
list of, list of next
Yeah.
steps there in the document. Obviously getting your feedback is great here. Would love to hear a comment from Phoebe if there's any news about the waiving the permits. I think the validating that we're not blowing the trumpet too much here, make sure there's going to be capacity and the incentives. I mean, some of them, like the tax credit from the IRA, obviously that's not going to run out or be exhausted, but there are some pretty substantial incentives from Marin in California, which, we need to make sure that there's capacity for those. But then I think it's finding someone to actually write the copy. This was not meant to be a, final copy here, right? And actually to design if it's a letter, that's easy. If it's gonna, be a postcard, it probably needs some sort of graphic design work. And then get budget approval for whatever the cost is gonna be if we decide that direct mailing is the right way to go.
So I can comment on a couple of those items, in terms of the design, of the mailer. I think I shared when we met a couple weeks ago that we have a template that I can send out to the subcommittee on, see if you'd like to use that. It's the same one that we used for the reach code workshops when we sent that out, the shoreline adaptation engagement that we're doing now. So just a simple postcard template. And in terms of the permit fees, that is something that the town is going to look at. But it needs to be part of the analysis that we do when we revise our entire fee schedule, which is on the work plan for this year. It is a priority because the fee schedule for all departments hasn't been updated since 2015. So this idea of a permit holiday or reduced permit fees is something for heat pump water heaters is something that will be looked at as part of that process. It does need to go through that full evaluation and it would need to be approved by council. So unfortunately, it's not a simple answer and I can't tell you right now when that's going to happen.
Is it, so if the fiscal year ends on June 30th and the process, as I recall, and please jump in and tell me where I'm getting this wrong, but the budget process starts sort of now, and then is ratified by council in May-ish. Is that right? For the coming fiscal year, starting July 1, is that, or am I way
Right,
off?
so the fee schedule revision is on our staff's work plan for the calendar year,
Okay,
2024. So it's going to be looked at this calendar year. And then I'm not exactly sure what the timeline would be for that to go.
okay, so then any conversation about waiving or reducing permit fees, even as a pilot on one item like water heaters, is not something that we can talk about for probably at least a year. Is that right?
I'm not sure exactly when that would.
But it's not gonna happen this fiscal year or probably this calendar year in terms of getting ratified. I mean, just trying to just sort of frame our own thinking about what we emphasize and what we wait on.
I think it would probably be a separate council item from the budget, so it's not necessarily tied to the budget, and there are also mid-year budget revisions.
Okay,
But I can't.
got it. Yeah. Just trying to get a ballpark idea of what we're,
Do we know what the fee is for, permitting of a hot water heater?
Yes, thank you for asking that question before the meeting, Martin, and unfortunately, I don't have the complete answer for you yet. For a like-for-like water heater replacement, which means, same type of water heater going in as the one that's coming out, it's about $260. But our current tech was gonna look into what that fee is if it's fuel conversion water heater, and there's some additional costs.
Plus, I'm imagining that things would get, complicated when you start talking about electrical upgrades, space configuration, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, if
So
it's
that's
being
just more
relocated or
impediments to
there's
it.
additional infrastructure, then there'd need to be a deeper plan review.
Maybe if the meeting minutes from this meeting included the desire to talk to council about making the cost for a permit for a heat pump water heater no more than a gas-powered hot water heater. Along with this developed strategy, I think it would frame for a good conversation with Eli, and maybe with the council. So we could minute it properly, include your draft plan as a developed strategy, and then we could make some individual phone calls or something too.
So it is on the staff's work plan that was approved by council last night.
Yeah.
Council knows that the fee schedule revision is on the work plan for this year.
It was there, was also the suggestion that they'd be looking at waiving or moderating it for, heat pumps in there, or just in general, we're looking at the fee schedule because we haven't looked at it in 6 years or whatever.
I have to look up the exact language that's on there.
I think we're being very clear here and less global and less ambiguous, which I really like. I think, this kind of targeted strategy, focusing on something, I think that it just sounds very clear to me.
Way you make things happen, yes.
And then for the success I'm happy to keep doing searches on the building permits, every quarter or something to give an update once we send it out.
Yeah, and we can also pull that.
That'd be
from
great.
A little more efficient.
so there is a difference in messaging between homeowners and property owners and the contractors. And my recollection is that there are about 60 contractors on Corte Madera's contact list, email listserv. It is a slightly different message, maybe, I think. But that outreach to them, because when your furnace goes out or when your water heater goes out, it's just like, make it better, fix it now. And oftentimes I think the recommendation from contractors is, don't worry, I've got this covered, I'm the expert, and they go to Home Depot and it's the like for like. It's just the fast thing that they can do. So having that conversation, and I know that's happening at the county level, about how we work with contractors, both as homeowners and as the town, in the permit process and that discussion.
Did you have a separate message for contractors?
Well, that's what I'm this is just, I'm talking off the top of my head right now. But that idea of, we want to make sure that they're not just coming in and saying, I'm running to Home Depot to get you another, like for like gas water heater, but that they understand that Corte Madera really wants this to change. And we want to support the contractors, but we want their buy-in. So the messaging might be different. We might want to consider that.
I think that's right. Sorry, we did talk about, about this a little bit. I think that's absolutely right. I sort of feel like that's probably a phase 2 here, or
Okay.
to some extent I don't want to say
parallel.
a parallel work stream, because I
Yeah.
just getting this done, I think will be hard enough. I think the second message to what you just said, Leslie, is also to the contractors is, hey, guys, to the conversation we've been having on email, it's very likely that you won't be allowed to install gas water heaters in, X number of years, and now would be a good time to start getting familiar with the heat pump water heaters and kind of get in that business, because it's only going to be growing over the next 3-4 years.
Or I think another thing, to some extent, the contractors are driven by the homeowners. And
To some
if
extent.
you can reinforce the message and tell the contractors, well, the homeowners want it done quickly, but if you do electric, it may be a little more time, but you get all this rebate, so it may be cheaper. So maybe reinforce that message to them.
I think that the ultimate issue is don't wait until it's an emergency. That's the kind of,
That's good.
because when it's an emergency, then it's just whatever's easiest and quickest. And there is a supply chain challenge.
Yeah.
With manufacturers and distributors. That's changing and maybe changing quickly, but that make a plan and do it before it's an emergency, I think is a really important thing not to get lost.
Right, but I think that's for the homeowner, but the contractor now is like, when the homeowner contacts the contractor,
Right.
the message would be, there are incentives, please, keep
And
that in
Peninsula
mind.
Clean Energy and some cities down the peninsula are looking at replacement loaners.
I've seen that.
And so there's, questions around like, well, that's really expensive. I mean, you're sort of having to put something in twice, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just like for like, and you're dropping it in and you're just hooking things up and that's not expensive, but looking at the opportunities for financing that or funding that, whether it's a 0 interest loan through the town or through a bank or, there's lots of options here that haven't been fully explored because it's kind of a new concept, but I don't want to lose track of the impediments that homeowners, that anyone would have, as well as the contractors. There's an impediment for them too. And
Well, the contractor could also, if the contractor had the right mindset or was educated, they might come in and replace with the temporary
Right.
water heater like for like, do
Right.
this. At the same time, advising the homeowner, look, this is just temporary. What we
Right.
ought to do is
Right.
hook you up with electric. We have to run a circuit over here.
Maybe.
We've got to get the thing in here. You're gonna get all kinds of rebates, and it'll be a win-win for the contractor
Right.
and the homeowner.
Right.
And then we're gonna take this old,
Right.
the
loaner
boat
out.
anchor out.
Right.
Right.
Right, but that's one of those options that we should not lose track of.
Is that working anywhere? Or is it just-
Yeah,
Any example?
San Bruno and Half Moon Bay and Peninsula Clean Energy is working on details around this as well. So-
Sounds very expensive.
Well, it doesn't, I'm not
It's
sure
not
that
really,
I'm not
because
sure
you're
that it
taking that-
needs to be. But that.
You can take a
piece,
used hot water, it's not, the water heater isn't the expensive thing, it's
It's the
putting it in and
regulation,
taking it out.
Sure, yeah.
Because it's.
right, so that
But I'm
loaner
just,
program concept.
Plumbers can charge a lot, like 400 an hour, so a couple hours of that taken in and out,
But
Right.
if everybody's getting free permits, coming in and doing this,
Right,
then they'll
yeah.
become more specialized.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something to
It'll be
keep in
supply
mind.
and
Yeah.
demand. It
It's
is,
something to keep in mind.
it's not a lot of work to put in a water heater.
It is.
My experience in dealing with the contractors that were part of participating in the Quit Carbon program is that
Mhm.
they're much smarter and much more aware of this than this conversation is giving them credit for.
Interesting.
And they are installing a lot of these.
Good.
So I
great
would
news.
advocate, I think Pat said it, is there phase one? I would advocate being clear and concise and going for the homeowners that make the decision. Rather than, and avoid, and have a phase two, but avoid the risk of perhaps having two messages that are seen as countering each other or confusing a point. But
Yeah.
I would make one strong step and then I'd step back and say, talk to a couple more contractors.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Part of this is an experiment too, right? I mean, will this have any impact? Will we see any change in, any uptick in water heaters? We can talk to our neighbors and did you guys get the mailing? Like, did you read it? Just to get some sense of whether this is worth the effort and the cost, frankly, as a first attempt, and then we can take it from there. But I completely agree with the points that have been made about there are multiple constituents here and different messages to each of them, and of course, different channels as well. And of course, we're a volunteer committee with limited time and resources. So, but maybe, I mean, it sounds like we have some consensus around, seems like people like the idea. People generally appreciate the direction it's going, although maybe we can refine the message a little bit. What do you all see as kind of next steps and timeline here?
Well, I would suggest having someone volunteer, maybe one or two, to draft postcards and see where we go.
I can do that. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I
Okay.
can do
Yeah,
that.
you can do it. That's what.
I mean, Leslie, if you get the
Read it.
content, if you get the content down and then we worry about the graphics later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll do the FAQ just to start putting that stuff up.
Onto the website, but
Yeah,
yeah,
go-
we're talking, but the messaging on the postcard has to be banned.
Yes, no, that's
Right.
not, I'm not gonna do that.
But, okay, well,
Yeah.
we'll take a shot at this as a draft and then go from there.
And I guess, being data driven, I would say, I really think, even though maybe not everybody gets a building permit, but the building permit data is the only data we have to see what actual installations are, and that's where the rubber meets the road. So I really think it's a matter of, have we influenced anyone? Because it really, from the data that was before, we haven't. So, I mean,
Yeah,
except
I think the
Yeah.
permit, that's right, Karen. I mean, because you need a signed off permit to get these rebates. So they go hand in hand. That's one thing. The other is to talk to some of the talk to folks like Quick Carbon, and if we could find a way to, I don't know, I think they do have to, from memory, I think they do ask, where did you hear about us? Would be, if we're gonna point people to resources like that, it'd be interesting to just poll them informally and say, did you guys get any leads out of this? And did it result in anything?
But
Phoebe,
there
I have
again,
a
I
question
think
for you.
if
Phoebe, I
they
have
don't
a
have a
question for
permanent
you.
Corte Madera, it didn't happen. Yeah.
But that point that in order to get the rebates, the incentives, they have to pull a permit. So there's an
Right.
incentive to
Yes.
do it legally, whereas, people
Right.
like you who can undo all of that and put it all back together, we're handy that way. Might not that you would ever not get a permit,
No,
but I think a lot of
For
people
sure.
just go ahead
And do it.
just go ahead and do it because it's simple. You're blushing.
But I guess that's what I'm saying. Is
Yeah.
I really, again, we could say who referred you, et cetera, but kind of like, we have the building permit data and,
Right.
yeah,
Right, and I think that because they have to get a permit in order to get the
Right,
incentive.
right. There's more likely to
We
get-
should
we
see
hope.
an uptick in
Yes,
in
hopefully,
permits being pulled.
yeah.
That's true.
Phoebe, have you given any, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
Phoebe, have you given any thought to how what you're hearing here relates to the climate action plan? How on point or off point are we?
I think it's definitely in line with the climate action plan. It's a lot more specific than anything in the climate action plan. I think this committee and the town's climate work has sort of gone beyond a lot of the items that are in the plan at this point. But it's definitely in line with some of the items that are related to reducing building emissions.
Okay, thanks. I think that's important that we just make sure we're on point. That's all.
rogue.
I want to try to wrap this great discussion up. Is there anything else?
I took a lot of
I
notes
think
and
you
on behalf of the committee, thank you guys for input. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for working. on this.
Fabulous job.
So,
Really
sorry, just to summarize next steps then. So Leslie, you want to take a cut at the actual copy for the postcard? Martin would start on FAQs, which would be great. I think that's a excellent idea. Phoebe, what's involved in getting budget to do a, direct mailer?
We have the budget for it, so that's not an
We have
issue.
budget.
Did you send me the template?
And I'll send Leslie the template, and I also have it on my list to follow up on the question about rebate availability. So I've started
Thank
looking
you.
into it, but I'll
Thank you.
get some better information on that.
And would it make sense for somebody from this committee to, I don't know what the right forum would be to propose, sort of have a conversation with town council about waiving the fees for this?
Mhm.
Obviously, if we wait for the full permit revision, there's no way this is gonna happen in the
Right.
time that we want it to. So to get, if it would be possible, I don't know if one of us were to go to the next council meeting and present it, or talk to our liaison, which is Eli, or what the right way to do that. But it feels like if we could have that in hand in the next couple of months, that would be a big help. If we don't, I would say let's just go ahead and not wait for the permitting thing, because I think we need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if it's not, if there wasn't a fee, then it wouldn't be on the fee schedule. And they drop something from the fee schedule and say,
It would need to be a full.
it doesn't count.
Nice try. Exactly.
Nice try.
Yeah.
I think to the point though, Pat, if we have a more organized, I mean, this is really good. If we take this to the next level where we're saying, here's the draft of our mailer, here are the frequently asked questions, and here's the next thing we're gonna do. Now, are you guys gonna stand in the way of this? Because, make it, show that we're really ready to move on it and not just waiting for someone else to do something.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And I think we're almost there. I mean, we certainly have the motivation to do it.
Pat, I think once your plan is included in meeting minutes, that would be the best tool to go to Eli and the council with. Once the draft is done.
Right.
I mean, we can do it beforehand, but I think once it's in the public record as part of the body of work by this committee, I think that'll be a better place to start the conversation.
Right.
You guys have done a great job.
Yeah, do you want to revise it and make it?
Yeah. Yeah, this is just a draft for you guys, and we'll come back together, won't we? Is that the plan?
After ski week?
Pat, isn't that the
I-
plan to reconvene and refine based on the comments today from the larger group?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to refine the draft that was shared here. I think the next step is to write the postcard, and then let's talk about it. That would be my.
Okay.
Yes.
Wouldn't take much rewriting.
Quick note, there's been a lot of discussion about panel upgrades, and I checked in with Tom Cabot, who is sort of the regional expert on this. And he's available for the March meeting to make a presentation to the committee, just sort of an FYI, where you can ask detailed questions and hear all about that. I won't be here for that meeting. I'm not even able to call in, but if that's of interest, I can follow up with Tom.
I've met him and watched him present something I think is very educational.
Been good.
To
Let's do
see,
it.
So you guys,
especially on a subject like this, where we're
Yes.
talking about nuts and bolts.
And
doing
and
things.
getting down to.
Other alternatives.
I think it's best to save that for future agenda items. So I think that we're starting to move on.
oh, sorry, am I jumping ahead?
Yes.
I think we're starting to move on. So so it sounds like the action items are understood. So can we move on to item 5?
Yeah, so just check for public comment
public
on this item.
Okay.
Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
Sid, anything you want to say?
Seeing none, yes, we can move on.
Okay. Updates and reports, starting with staff.
So I have quite a few updates for you all since it's been a while since our last meeting. The first update is on the Ninth Circuit ruling in the California Restaurant Association versus City of Berkeley case. So as this committee is aware, in April of last year, a 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals found that the city of Berkeley's all-electric new construction policy was preempted by the Federal Energy Policy and Conservation Act. And we just heard in early January of this year that the Ninth Circuit is not going to rehear that case. So the 3-judge panel's decision is final unless Berkeley decides to appeal to the Supreme Court, which is unlikely. And so that ruling is now binding for all jurisdictions within the Ninth Circuit, which includes Corte Madera. And essentially that means that we can no longer enforce our all-electric ordinance as well. So this is unfortunate, not the news we were hoping for, but it does give us some clarity on what we can and can't do to reduce building emissions going forward. So I wanted to share our staff's preliminary recommendations on next steps here. In the new construction side, staff are recommending an advocacy approach. And so last night, Town Council approved signing on to a letter with other California jurisdictions to urge the state to implement a mandatory zero emissions new construction policy. On the existing building sides, staff do intend to move forward with the renovation of each codes that were discussed last year. So there's some additional analysis and work to do there, but those codes will be brought back to this committee for a recommendation before they're taken to council. And I'm also hoping to connect individually with Karen and Pat, since you all weren't here when the committee extensively discussed these codes last year. So I want to get you two up to date and make sure all your questions are answered about those codes. Just considering that we are already 1 year into this code cycle. The building codes are readopted every 3 years. So if we want this ordinance to take effect and be worthwhile this code cycle, we need to get moving on that.
So I'm a little, can you just clarify here? So the sort of requirement for electrification does not stand. So now it's going to be like a recommendation, or are you waiting to get a state policy, or what actually are the codes going to be altered? How are they going to be altered?
Right. So on the new construction side, that's all that town had adopted so far was all electric new construction
Right.
requirement. So that's no longer enforceable. We're not recommending taking any additional action there this code cycle.
Okay.
So the council is, signing on this letter to advocate that the state take the lead here, and we'll
just
still
wait.
following that closely
Okay.
to see what the outcome is.
Okay.
But the existing policies related to existing policies aren't affected by the Berkeley ruling.
Okay.
So staff feels that we're able to move forward on that front. Any other questions about that update?
There are some workarounds that are being put into legislation in other places. So this is something to follow as well, that just takes a different approach rather than the public health issue or the police, not force. There's forget the term, but it allows a jurisdiction to use their police action to enforce some of these things. That's what was challenged, I think, with Berkeley. That's what they were using as their foundation for that ordinance, but there are other approaches. So I'm still sort of keeping my fingers on that, or my eyeball on that. And perhaps when something looks like we can use it, I'll certainly bring it forward.
Thank you.
And I know you're looking at that too. I know you're watching this. Everyone's watching this, so.
Yeah, it always helps to have more eyes on it. All right, so next update, I've already mentioned this, but the 2024 staff work plan was approved by town council last night. So that includes the climate action items that were discussed by the committee last November. One item just to highlight on there that there's been some updates on are the EV charging station installation. So we have received the reports regarding the feasibility of the sites that this committee discussed, the public parking lots in town. So staff are reviewing those now and hope to be able to move forward with actually installing some stations this calendar year.
Can we see that analysis?
Potentially, some of it is not shareable. But I'll take a look and see what can be shared.
Please.
And then the countywide electrification roadmap is sort of wrapping up the stakeholder engagement process that Dave and I have been participating in. So they have now released the proposed key actions for public feedback. So I'll send the survey out to you all after this meeting. It's open until March 5th. And it will also be publicized on the town's social media and newsletter. So looking for feedback from the broader community about these actions that have been prioritized through the workshops, the stakeholder workshops. And then finally, I connected with Vice Chair Ruiz a couple weeks ago, and she asked me to poll you all on your interest and availability for participating in the Villages Earth Day event, which will be held on April 20th this year from 12 to 2 p.m. And so the ask is if the committee is interested in participating in that event this year, I believe they provide the tables and everything, so it's a relatively easy setup. You don't have to set up you don't have to haul over and set up the table and tent and everything. It's just bringing the materials and bringing volunteers to staff it for, I believe, just 2 hours.
What was that date again?
The 20th.
20th?
There again, I guess I would go back to trying to focus our energies, and I don't know anything about this event, but in the other two events, it seemed it was far and few between people who were actually interested in, the 6 items to do for climate change. And I realize that, maybe every contact is good or whatever, but being a efficient economist, I think, okay, how can we really focus our efforts on things that are effective? And I'm wondering with this, is it really reaching a market, and would it really be effective? I don't know.
So who attended this event last year? Was it
I did.
Martin and anyone else from the committee? Do you want to speak to
I
that
think
one?
Leslie and I didn't we, Leslie?
I'm not sure it was Earth Day. It was, I think it was the car show. But maybe we did Earth Day also. There's farmer's market and what have you.
I think Phil was anyway, we were at one of those things. My sense of that is, you're right. This isn't something that's going to really result in something, but just being out there, I think, is worth it. And if you've got something else you're doing, fine, but otherwise, why not?
Well, I guess I felt very, not frustrated, but I was very disillusioned that I really felt like I spent 2 hours and nothing was accomplished.
Yes.
Yeah, and I really feel like if we could, if you're gonna spend 2 hours, let's message a postcard, or let's
Right,
put the next
well,
one,
I
or.
think this
Yeah.
I think this might depend on individuals' availability or their desire to do this. Because I want to echo what Martin said, is that sometimes you got to show up and just to be seen. But if this is a burden for everybody and nobody has time to do it, then that's a bad idea too. So
But I also think that April, I mean, that's a couple of months from now, right? We're gonna have our act together with this hot water heater thing. That we might have a better focus. One of the criticisms that I picked up on is that people thought we were just trying to sell electric vehicles, right? And of course, we don't want to appear that way. But, I think we can have a more focused message and present who we are and what we're doing better. But you don't have to come.
can we, Phoebe, can we let people get back to you via email?
Yeah, I'll send out an email after this with the details.
And I think having better collateral, better
Yes.
presence when we table is essential. That we need to put some thought and effort into what is on the table and how we present it. So.
We do
I'd like to work on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
we can, or Phoebe, do please include the ambassadors in that email.
Yes.
In case they want to attend and see what this is like.
That's something. That would be a great place to showcase our ambassadors being with us, that.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just a bunch of old people worried about the climate, you
Yeah.
know, that it's. I think it's a great idea. I'd love to have them. That'd be.
And it might be the kind of thing that the ambassadors might want to do. I don't want to speak for them, but
Yes.
And I think we need buttons and t-shirts. That's- The buttons just say, talk to me about something. That doesn't.
Buttons and t-shirts.
I like a
That's great.
postcard approach.
Yeah.
People can take a message with them.
Yeah.
Fridge magnet.
I want to recognize the time here. I think we beat this one to death. Were there more updates?
That's all I have. That's
Okay.
it from staff. Thank you.
Are there any updates from any committee members before we go into future agenda items? No, hearing none. Martin, did you have any update on the Chronicles?
No, I'm just putting stuff out. I'm, looking for material, so
I need to send you stuff.
you do need to send me
I
stuff,
know.
Okay,
so please do.
Yeah.
I will
Well, I think-
harass.
you can
Please.
share about the ambassadors as well.
Yes,
Moving on to item 6, future agenda items. Leslie, you had an idea?
Yeah, what was that? Inviting Tom Cabot in March to the March meeting to do a presentation, probably wouldn't be in person, but probably presented virtually on on panel upgrades.
Let me just clarify, is this panel upgrades necessary for just heat pumps or
No,
upgrades
It's a
for
bigger
like electric
conversation.
charger?
Yeah,
et
it's a
cetera? That
bigger
would be great,
conversation,
yeah.
But he really is the expert on this, and the inclination from anecdotally that I've heard is that contractors love to say, oh, you must upgrade your panel, and that's not the case. But understanding the why, and I think that Tom is really an expert at explaining it. But I won't be here, so I'll be up in Sacramento.
Thank you, Leslie.
Yeah, I'll reach out to Tom. Again, he confirmed that he could make it.
Are there any discussion on that idea? No?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Phoebe, is there anything that we left out?
I don't have anything for the committee, but Karen was mentioning the idea of bringing back an engagement topic, a broader engagement topic. Is there anyone that would like to lead that discussion to talk about other avenues of engagement beyond this targeted approach to heat pump water heaters?
Well, and let me just say, it certainly could be targeted. For instance, we talked about a library session, and I guess that's one thing I thought. You have a library session on a topic, you're drawing the people who are interested in it.
Right.
Now, it may, and you said, I think Fairfax has done it, or maybe one other time, you get feedback on, has that been useful, and do we want to do it? It's just another way of trying to reach interested parties. And if you have the information, I could reach out to Fairfax or whatever you want and try and see what that would be.
Yeah, I can get you.
Okay, so if you want, I can explore that.
Yeah, and talk with Amy, because she and I worked on giving a presentation to the Lions Club now, like a year and a half ago, I think.
Okay.
And that is floating around, and it's sort of boilerplate, but it needs to be updated, but that's, that would give you a place to start anyway. And Amy's been doing the heavy lifting on our outreach.
Well, I guess that would be good if we are focused as a committee on, say, water heating. I think we might want to consider a presentation at the library focused on why we think water heating is important. And then we could have some background, but just trying to reinforce this specific message. It's a thought.
So no, it's a good thought. And in April, it's Earth Day month, and I think it's sort of, for me, it's like Giving Tuesday. It's like, if I see another Giving Tuesday email, it's just delete, delete, delete. And I don't know that everyone feels that way about Earth Day in April, that they're just getting inundated with emails and, you know, do this stuff for the climate. But April would be an ideal month to have some additional presence and scheduling something at the library or with the Lions Club a couple of months from now might not be a bad strategy.
Another way to look at it would be to either try and do it before or right after a postcard mailing.
Yeah.
Some way of reinforcing
Yeah.
or being preemptive, saying, hey, this is coming. We're gonna tell you more about it, you know, kind of thing. I don't know.
No, I think you're
These are
absolutely
thoughts.
spot on.
Another idea is pretty soon our all electrics town hall is going to be open. And we'll be able to use
Right.
council chambers there to talk about these topics as well.
So that would be, yeah, in your new town hall coming here.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Has there been any more discussion about really doing public tours of the new building? And specifically talking about all of the building electrification approaches and upgrades, energy efficiency and all of that?
I have not been part of discussions about tours for the new facility, but I think it's something that if this committee wanted to propose and support the creation of that, I think that's something we could discuss.
When you say support the creation of that, what does that mean?
Conduct the tour.
Don't put words in her mouth.
I mean, it could be any number of things. I mean, I am working on sort of summarizing what those features are so that we can have that displayed somehow in the town
Great.
hall.
Great.
But it could be even like a self-guided tour with QR codes that describe different.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. That's great.
And it would be great to have the committee's support in developing that.
Sure.
If there's interest.
That's a really great idea. The QR codes that's really good on ya.
I think it's a great idea to use the new chambers and to talk about the electrification there. If there's nothing else, I'm gonna try to keep us on schedule and adjourn. Phoebe,
Just to add to that, but just to reiterate, which was a great idea, which is if we could fix a date to have a talk about, I know it's like really exciting stuff that people want to do in their free time, but a talk about heat pump water heaters at the new town hall, if we could add that to the postcard, I think that's a fantastic idea.
That's a good idea.
That is a good
Okay,
idea.
Yeah, yeah.
So we kind of, it sounds to me, just to sort of keep us on this track, that we're looking at April as the month to start really rolling this out. It could be the month where the postcard goes out, where, do we think it's gonna be open in April?
I don't know that April is
I don't-
a date.
I'm just, yeah.
I think we just, the idea is to coordinate a town hall talk with a postcard. So I think whenever the postcard gets ready and the town hall.
I
can
think it's good to
coordinate
have
that, yeah.
deadlines though, and
Yes,
we're
but
not
yeah.
just like, we'll get to it eventually, but
Yeah.
I think we want
I
to
think-
be.
I think
on
Phoebe
this.
could help us with a date, but I think something more like May would be better.
Early
May-
May, sort of right after Earth Day. No. I mean, I don't disagree. Any sense of when it might?
I think it's a moving target. I wouldn't want
It's
to.
called
Think-
spring.
I would think May or June, things will be settled, the carpet,
Well, yeah, worst case, we could do it somewhere else, right, at the community center or something, but, or, I mean, you'd have it online anyway, right? It'd be a,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Yeah,
if we could somehow coordinate the two, that would be great.
just an
Yeah.
idea. Phoebe, maybe we can talk about this or think about it, but we could cover this topic during our meeting time. If it's going to be an evening in the week, we could have it be as part of this meeting. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
Or
we
does it
could
need to
have
be
maybe a
later?
special meeting of the Climate Action
Yeah.
Committee.
Yeah, like a special meeting. So we combine our agenda and this topic and we can do a number of things. Just a thought.
Keep thinking on
I
that.
like that.
It is 6 o'clock. Are there any other future agenda items? No, hearing none. I'll adjourn this. Our next meeting is March 20th, at 4:30. Thanks, guys. And welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome to.
Feel better, David.
Somebody can bang the gavel for us.
Yeah, hope you feel better, David.